Hello, my name is Laurie McGavin-Bachman, and I work in the Adult Programs Department at the Ridgefield Library. On behalf of the library, I would like to welcome you to the fourth in a six-part series of environmental programs via Zoom that focus on climate change and making smart energy choices, all held on consecutive Mondays at 6 o'clock through May 24th. This series is co-sponsored by the Ridgefield Library and the Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment, known as RACE. Tonight's program is entitled Replacing Your Oil Furnace in HVAC with Geothermal with Beth Ingram and John Paul Keisel. You can put your questions in the chat function at the bottom of your screen at any time during the presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Gavin Watson, who will introduce our program and our speakers tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie. Welcome, everybody. This is the fourth episode in our Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment Climate Change Zoom series. There's this one and two more coming up. The Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment is a volunteer group of like-minded individuals concerned about the state of the environment and sufficiently action-oriented to take steps to remedy matters. Tonight we have Beth Ingram, who's a homeowner and is going to be doing the first part of the presentation about replacing an oil furnace and HVAC with geothermal. Beth and her husband Chris are Ridgefield residents and passionate about helping homeowners transition from fossil fuel heating systems to renewable geothermal heating and cooling systems. Chris Ingram is a sustainability investment manager, and Beth is a part-time teacher and full-time mom to their 3 children. And she's joined by John Paul Keisel. John Paul is the territory sales manager for Water Furnace. And again, as Laurie was saying, I'll be watching the chat and fielding questions at appropriate times. So feel free, if something pops in your head, you have a question to ask, put it in the chat. And then if you are interested in joining RACE or finding out about RACE, I put the RACE Gmail in the chat so you can go there. So without further ado, welcome back. Oops, looks like we're experiencing some technical difficulties. John Paul, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, good. We'll give Beth a minute to get back. If she has trouble getting back in or she's dropping out, maybe we'll ask you to go first.
Sure.
We'll wait for a couple more minutes for Beth.
Yeah, we'll give her a couple more seconds.
Okay.
So we were chatting earlier before this, and Beth was basically filling me in that they had bought a house in Ridgefield. It was a fairly new house, had a heating system in it already, but the heating bills were quite large. I didn't get a chance to ask her, but I'm guessing this is a first-time homeowner or first-time owning a house this large, and they didn't realize what it was going to amount to. And also being interested in environmental sustainability, they started looking at options and found the geothermal heat pumps is something they're interested in doing, which they went ahead and did.
Maybe we should go ahead with John Paul.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. John Paul, you want to go for it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'll text it Beth.
Okay.
All right. So am I sharing my screen? Can everyone see that?
Yeah. You're good.
Okay. All right, great. So again, my name's John Paul Keisel. I'm the territory manager for Water Furnace. I cover Connecticut, Rhode Island, downstate New York, including Long Island and the 5 boroughs, as well as northern New Jersey, which is where I make my home. Water Furnace is the largest and one of the most respected manufacturers of geothermal heat pumps in the United States and Canada. So Albert Einstein said that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. Energy on Earth originates in our sun through nuclear fusion. The sun converts potential energy to solar energy. This energy travels over 90 million miles through space and it joins us here on Earth. This solar energy is in turn stored in the Earth as geothermal energy. We can harness this renewable geothermal energy and use it as a power source for various uses, including what we're going to be talking about today: home heating, cooling, and domestic hot water production. So this slide here is talking about energy efficiency and cooling costs. Actually, I think, hold on. I lost a slide.
Yeah, you had one with pretty graphics before.
Well, no, I don't know what happened to it. There was one for heating, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So basically, this is just talking about costs for heating and cooling. So the heating, there's like, it was, I kind of wish I had that slide. It showed, the costs of propane, oil, natural gas, as well as geothermal. So, and the cost in heating is showing in per million BTUs. We were around $25 to $30 per million BTUs using oil and propane. We're around $15 to $20 if you're using natural gas, and then we were in the $5 to $8 range for geothermal. Now, one thing to note is that these prices are based on these energy rates down here. So in Connecticut, the energy rates are higher. We're looking at, this is using 12 cents per kilowatt hour. In Connecticut, you're probably closer to 15 to 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Natural gas at $1.50 per cubic foot, fuel oil at $2.28, and propane at $2.20. So oil and propane, for those of you who use that to heat your home, you know that those fuel rates can fluctuate wildly from year to year. One year, maybe you're around $2.50 a gallon for oil. The next year could be $4 a gallon. So that makes it hard to budget. When you're using geothermal, you're going to constantly be having a reliable amount. You're not going to have big fluctuations. Over here, we're looking at cooling costs. So with a standard efficiency air conditioner or a heat pump, you're going to be looking at, around $18 to $20. And again, this is still based on that 12 cents, so it's higher. Whereas with geothermal, you're going to be in that, in that $5 range per million BTUs. Now, just for reference, when we're talking about cooling, the typical term that people talk about cooling in, they use tons. 1 ton of cooling is equal to 12,000 BTUs, okay? So when we are using conventional equipment, again, we can't create or destroy energy. All we can do is move it or convert it. So with conventional equipment, we've got this unit over here. This is called the condenser unit. You guys have these things parked on the sides of your homes. There's a big fan inside. Along the outside of the condensing unit is a big coil. So what we're doing is we're moving warm air from your house, we're taking the heat energy and we're moving it to this condenser on the outside of the house. And then that fan is moving cooler air across those coils and blowing the heat off the top. Now, the hotter it gets outside, the less that air wants to accept that heat. So the hotter it is outside, the harder it is to cool your home, the harder it is for the equipment to work, and the less, the efficiency is going to go down. With a conventional air source heat pump, when it's really cold outside, there's less ambient air for us to take and convert to heating energy that we can move into the house. So when you're looking at conventional air conditioners or conventional air source heat pumps, the more we need it to work, meaning the more the extreme temperatures are outside, the less effective and the less efficient the equipment is. With a geothermal system, we don't have to worry about any of that stuff, because what we have is we have a buried, there's a series of piping that would be buried in your yard. We refer to it as a loop field or the ground loop. Once you get below a few feet deep, the temperature of the earth is pretty consistent year round. Once you go about 6 feet down, you're looking at pretty much 55-degree temperature. Doesn't matter if it's -10 outside or 110 outside, that ground is always going to be that same sort of, that same temperature range. And that allows us to heat and cool very effectively using geothermal without, without seeing those swings in efficiency. And again, it doesn't matter if it's winter or summer, that earth is always going to be that same temperature range. Now, that the earth loops, the loop field, that is, they last 100 years or more. I mean, that once you put those things in, they're going to outlive you. Like they're going to be there forever. And it's a durable, it's a very durable product that goes down. Now, the loop field is probably the biggest part of the initial investment when you're converting to a geothermal type of system. So it's a more expensive installation up front because apart from just changing out the equipment, which is going to connect to your existing duct system in your home or your existing heating and cooling distribution systems, you also have to put that loop field in. But that ground loop is basically, it's your own personal power plant, and it's going to be giving you free energy from the minute you put it in until, over 100 years later. So on the replacement of the system, so you put your system in, typically these units last around 20 to 25 years. Now you're replacing it, you'd be connecting it to that existing ground loop. And at that point, it's paying you back. Whereas with a conventional system, they never pay you back. You're always using either natural gas or oil or electricity that's coming from somewhere else. And the second system, you replace it, it costs more. The third system, you replace it, it costs more. Whereas with the geothermal system, you're going to be scaling up. And everything here is unrealized savings when you're comparing a conventional system to a geothermal system. There's plenty of incentives available. There's a federal tax credit that's available right now, 26% federal tax credit through the end of 2022. At the end of 2022, it's scheduled to reduce to a 22% federal tax credit through the end of 2023. On top of that, there is the Connecticut, it's called Energize Connecticut Geothermal Heat Pump Rebate. they'll pay up to $1,500 per ton for customers who heat with fuel oil or propane. The incentive rates are different if you're converting from natural gas or from other fuel sources. But if you're looking at switching from fuel oil or propane, and you're looking at a 5-ton system, you know, that's going to be like a $7,500 rebate on top of the 26% federal tax credit. You can couple that with affordable loans that are available. There's these things that are called combination loans, where you can get something like a 0% interest loan for the first 12 or 18 months. In that period of time, you'll get your incentives back from the utility and from the IRS, and then, you know, it converts to a low interest loan that your energy savings are now going to help offset the payment for. So geothermal provides a comfort level that most people haven't experienced before. Geothermal systems, they really move a lot of air around the home, which is going to remove more humidity in the wet summer months. It's going to pull more air through your air filter. So when the pollen levels are crazy high, like they are right now, anybody who's got allergies, we're going to be moving more air through your filter. With the addition of a humidifier, we can keep nice, comfortable humidity levels throughout the home year round. And you keep clean, comfortable, healthy air. You know, you can enjoy it in your home year round. So according to surveys, over 95% of geothermal HVAC owners would recommend one to their friends or family. So the 95% is like, that's super high. Geothermal systems are also super quiet. We get rid of that condensing unit that's on the outside of the house. So now if you're outside in the summertime enjoying a barbecue with your friends or your family, you don't have to hear those condensers kicking on. They're not going to be waking you up at night if they're old and noisy. They're just super quiet. And hands down, geothermal is the single most environmentally friendly and cost-effective way to heat and cool your home. Installing a single geothermal system is the equivalent of planting 750 trees. All right, and that's according to the EPA. So this is going back to longevity of equipment. So a typical furnace, oil-fired or gas-fired, has a typical life expectancy of 15 to 18 years. A typical geothermal unit lasts 25 years or more. And this is based on information from energy.gov as well as ASHRAE. ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And it's an American professional HVAC association that's respected industry-wide. Now we look at the outdoor unit. So a conventional heat pump, air source heat pump, or a conventional air conditioner is going to last typically in the 15 to 18 year range. Again, this is according to ASHRAE, whereas that ground loop, that's going to last 100 years or more. Plus, you don't have that thing sitting on your lawn anymore. Geothermal units, since we're getting rid of that outdoor unit, they're not subjected to the punishing effects of the outdoor weather. They don't need to go through a defrost cycle like a typical heat pump, an air source heat pump. And those defrost cycles, they really lower the overall efficiency of a heat pump. Geothermal units are very safe. There's no more combustion that we have to worry about. So there's no flames. There's no fumes. There's no carbon monoxide. We don't need to worry about gas leaks. We don't have to worry about things like plugged or cracked heat exchangers like you would have in a conventional unit. Also, if you're comparing to heating oil, now we don't have that oil tank that if it's buried, that's always a worry that that those things can leak and contaminate the earth and contaminate the groundwater. So apart from being an environmental disaster, it also costs a fortune to remediate a leaking oil tank. So that's all stuff that you don't need to worry about with geothermal either. Combustion from a normal furnace will dry the air, can give you an odor of scorched air, especially in those first heating cycles of the year. Over the year, the dust and dirt will settle on the heat exchangers. That'll burn off and it'll create kind of a funky smell. With geothermal, this isn't going to happen. Geothermal units are flexible. It's a complete solution that's going to give you heating. It's going to give you cooling. It'll give you hot water. You can do your indoor air quality. There's even units that can be used for radiant heating, to heat your swimming pool, or even for snow melt systems for your walkways and your driveways on your property. They're less obtrusive. We don't have a tank outside anymore. We don't have a condensing unit outside anymore. So you're going to get some of your yard back. Instead, you could plant a pretty flower garden or put some nice shrubs. When you're comparing to something like a mini split system, we don't have any conspicuous, there's nothing hanging on the wall. It's all very low key, and you don't see it. So that's nice too. Geothermal units, some of the units have these things. It's called the de-superheater. What it's going to do is it will help to use some of the heat that's going to be rejected from your home to the ground loop, and instead we can use that and harness that energy to make hot water for the house. So I see on the chat that there's a few questions. I mean, is there anything that we want to address right now, or should I keep going?
Sure. Yeah, we could do a few questions. Some of them you have hit on.
Okay.
But let's mix it up a little bit. So one of the questions is about how much land you need to to effectively cool X amount of space. Somebody in particular, I think, has a 450 square foot cabin, so a little tiny cabin. But maybe in terms of like per 1,000 square feet of house, you need, X amount of buried coils.
For the loop field, you mean?
Yeah, the heating, like how much land for the field?
It depends on how much capacity you need and how much land you have. There's several different ways that a loop field could be constructed. So if you look in the image here on the right, it looks like this is what's called a horizontal,
like
system.
Trombone kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So this is a horizontal. It's called like a racetrack, the way that this goes. And the loops, like they just kind of snake back and forth. You can also do what's called a slinky, where there's going to be circles that are basically laid out and stretched out, and those would be buried. When you're doing new construction, something like that is probably going to be done more frequently. But you can also do a horizontal bore, like a well, for those of you who have well water. So they'll drill straight down into the ground, and you can go 500 feet or more. The amount that you need, it's really all dependent on the load of the house, and as well as things like soil condition and rock condition. But those are things that that your geothermal dealer would be able to answer more specifically for everyone's particular home.
Okay.
But in Connecticut, more often than not, horizontal or vertical drilling is what's done.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that
Yeah, so-
requires less room.
Right. So on a horizontal system though, and I think I heard you say like if you're down about 6 feet, the ground's essentially at the same temperature year round. So are these things usually put that deep down, or you just go down maybe like 4 or 5 feet, or what's the typical?
It depends on the temperatures that, you know, that we experience. So in Connecticut, you know, there's some pretty cold winters. Deeper is better, right?
Yep.
The deeper you go, the less concern there
Yeah.
is of freezing up, and the more consistent the temperature. So that's another benefit of a vertical bore, is that, you know, the deeper you go, the better. So, you know, on a new construction, they would probably put it, I would say, a minimum of 6 feet down.
Okay.
Deeper.
Okay. Well, and I was thinking too, like if it was new construction, if I was building a brand new house right now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm digging a hole for a foundation anyway.
Yep.
Why wouldn't I dig another foot down or 2 feet down and lay, you know, a bunch of stuff under the foundation? It might not be sufficient, but I'm digging a hole anyhow.
Well, they can go below the building. They can go underneath the driveway. They can go
Yep.
underneath the tennis court. They can go in the yard.
Yeah.
There's really, you know, the types of things that it can't be near are going to be things like, you know, septic tanks, leach fields, things like that. So there's certain restrictions, but that's all going to vary depending on
Right.
depending on the specifics.
Yeah. So if somebody lives on like a really rocky terrain or whatever, then they'd more likely just drill holes straight down,
Yeah.
put a couple of wells in, do vertical wells, like you were saying,
Yep.
in that
Yeah.
kind of instance.
If the digging's really hard, that's just going to make more. That just drives up the cost, right?
Right. So if someone has a well, say someone's got a well, it's already 350 feet deep, that's for their regular drinking water. Can they run a loop down to the bottom of that well and then back up again? And
No,
and
it would need to be a separate well.
has to be a separate well. It can't just run a tube down and up or whatever. Okay.
No, yeah, it needs to be separate. You can't just stick it into the existing well, because then it'll rob your drinking water, right?
Well, oh yeah, I was thinking of like a closed loop inside the well, inserting like a closed loop.
Oh,
thing
no, yeah. So when you're putting these loops down into the earth, they also need to, there's this stuff, it's called grout. It's basically a slurry that you put down that's going to aid with the heat exchange.
Oh, with the heat transfer. Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly right. We need to trade heat from your home to the earth, or vice versa. Like, you know, if we're cooling the home, we need to take that heat from the home. That heat is going to be put into the brine solution or the water that's being pumped through that loop field, and then we pump that warm water to the earth. The earth takes that heat, and cool water comes back. Reverse that when we're cooling the home or when we're heating the home.
So it could be water going through the loop, or a brine solution, or like a glycol water solution or something like that.
Yeah, usually it's going to be a brine solution, meaning an antifreeze of some sort, like glycol or ethanol, mixed with water.
Okay. And how about, what if somebody happens to live on a lake?
Then you could do a lake loop, and a lake loop is another, like that's another way to do it. And you don't have to do a bunch of excavation. You just need to dig a trench from the house to the lake, so you can connect the piping that goes from your geothermal unit in your basement to that lake loop.
Yeah.
So something like that. If you've got a private lake, you'll be able to do something like that. If you live in like a lake community, you know, you may or may not be able to do that, depending on local building codes, as well as what the HOA you know, says, because the HOA is like, they're the owners of the lake, so they may or may not allow that.
Yeah. So I guess if somebody wanted to do a big water feature though in their yard or something, they could do that for the
Yeah, I mean, if you've got
tubing in there.
usually you'd probably need a lake that's about an acre or something like that.
Yeah,
It can't just
yeah.
be like a little pond that's, 50 by 50 or something like that. It would need to be pretty
Yeah.
big, but
So,
yeah, a lake loop is another option.
cool. So there are a couple of questions about, like, isn't the ground going to heat up over time or cool down over time? And then how does a system get heat out of the ground or cooling out of the ground? Because isn't it the wrong temperature for what you're looking for and stuff? So I think we need to go more deep into like how a heat pump actually works, just a little bit. And I see Beth's back. So
Okay.
she unfortunately had lost her connection. So she's back, but maybe since I'm seeing some questions about that, could you just roughly talk
Yeah,
about?
let's touch on that for a second. So in regards to the question about how do we take heat from the earth, right? The earth is 50
Right.
degrees. We're trying to make your house around 70. Using the refrigeration cycle. So there's refrigerant in this equipment. Right now it's R410. That's going to be changing in the not too distant future to be compliant with, with rules from like the government and the EPA.
Right. F gases and stuff.
Yeah, exactly
Yeah.
right. HCFCs. But so basically refrigerant, what it is it's a liquid that's going to change state from liquid to gas at a relatively low temperature. So when it boils and it changes state, it can absorb a lot more energy. So that's how we transfer this heat, and that's how we make that leap. And your conventional air conditioner or heat pump does the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So a heat pump, an air source heat pump, it can warm your house even when it's 30 degrees outside, right? It's
Right.
taking heat from outside and it's moving it inside.
Yeah.
So using that state change is how we can increase the amount of energy that we're going to be moving from one place to another.
Yeah. I usually tell people it's sort of like a refrigerator, except running the other way. It's the same deal. Your refrigerator is pumping the heat from inside the refrigerator to the outside. And
Yeah.
this is basically just the other way. In the summertime, that's exactly what's happening. Your house is like inside the refrigerator, but
That is exactly what's happening.
It's just going the other way around.
It's the same exact thing. We're not making cold air. We're not making a refrigerator cold. What we're doing is we're taking the heat and moving it out.
Right.
So it's the same thing in a home.
Yeah.
We're taking heat from one place and we're moving it to another.
Yeah. And so there's a question about getting the water hot enough for like showers and that kind of thing.
For domestic hot water?
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll
Easily.
It'll make the water temperatures just like you're used to. Now, depending on the time of year, it'll be more or less effective. So what you do is you pair it with something like an electric water heater, and it helps it out.
Okay. Well, and I noticed too, you alluded to it before also, but like in the summertime when you're air conditioning your house, that you're basically moving the heat out of your house. And while it's in the system, you can push that into some hot water and make hot water essentially for free, because you've already removed the heat from your house anyway. You got to get rid of it somewhere. If you can just stuff it in the water that's in the hot water tank, then that's like free stuff.
It's free hot water. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. I mean, rather than move all that heat and put it into the earth outside, we're going to take some of that, make your hot water, and then dump the excess into the loop outside. Now, there was another question that you'd mentioned, asking about, like, I guess overheating, or like it's called taxing the loop. But Mother Nature, it really, like, a properly designed loop field is not going to freeze or overheat the earth, right? So, I mean, it's possible if you have a poorly designed loop field that it's not going to perform as expected. But when you have a correctly designed loop field, it's going to be able to pull as much heat from the earth as we need, and we're going to be able to reject as much heat, right? So when we're talking about geothermal, it's called heat of rejection or heat of extraction. So heat of extraction, we're taking heat from the earth and we're moving it into the house. Heat of rejection is when we're cooling, we're rejecting heat from the home and putting it into the earth. When a loop field is correctly designed, there's no chance of damaging the soil or the earth. It's not like you're going to have a hot spot in the middle of the lawn or something like that.
Yep. And obviously, if your field is 5 or 6 feet down or whatever, you can plant flowers, bushes, things like that. But you probably shouldn't put a 100-year-old oak tree like right on top of that or something, right?
Yeah, you can plant trees.
Okay. Okay.
The roots aren't going to destroy it. So the pipe, it's made of high density polyethylene.
Okay.
It's not, roots aren't going to go through.
They're just going to go around it,
like a cast iron. I don't know. Maybe somebody's had roots go into their waistline for their sewer, or like their septic or anything. Like this piping. It's not going to. Roots and organic growth are not going to damage it.
Cool. Okay. Okay. There was one question about putting it over the top of the septic field. I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, you can't do that.
Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to do that because the temperatures could affect the way that the septic field is. Plus, health codes don't allow that.
I would guess. Yeah.
Local building codes aren't going to allow for a loop field to be installed.
Yep.
In the same area as a septic tank or a leach field would.
Okay.
So that's a no-no.
And then there were questions earlier. You did hit on it, but if somebody doesn't have air conditioning, if they don't have forced air, and they just have baseboard heat or radiant floor heat or things like that.
There's water-to-water systems that you can use to connect to a radiant system. Yes.
Okay. So and would they have to potentially boost the size of the radiant system, or to is the water going to be hot enough that it'll work the same, or would they have to add maybe more radiators, or is it just depend on the house and the insulation?
It depends on. It just like anything else in life. It depends. Any contractor that's worth their salt should be doing a proper load calculation to make sure that the system is designed correctly to provide the right amount of heat or the right amount of cooling for the home. We don't want to be undersized. We don't want to be undersized or oversized. It needs to, like a suit, it needs to fit right.
Yep. Cool. So Beth's back maybe, and we only have maybe 20 more minutes. I think I'm looking at.
I just have 2 more slides here.
Sure. Yeah. Go for it. Absolutely. I forgot we digressed.
No, that's okay. I just saw in the chat bubble there were a bunch of things. So geothermal is a renewable source, right? It's a renewable energy source. Unlike a windmill or unlike solar panels, you don't see it, right? It's underground, but it's a renewable energy source. And when you're comparing it to something like wind or to solar, a 4.5 kilowatt wind turbine, the slide here is basically self-explanatory. But renewable, geothermal, if the wind isn't blowing, if the sun's not shining, the geothermal energy is still there, and your loop field is always going to be producing energy for you. It's an infinite and renewable battery that you can tap into to heat and cool your home.
Cool.
So peak performance, wind is peaking out 11% of the time. Solar is peaking out 15% of the time. Geothermal is at peak performance 100% of the time. Solar is great. Wind energy is great. In my opinion, if we're trying to hit net zero by 2050, that's a pretty lofty goal, but I think we can get there. And in order to get there, we need to really look at all of these technologies together.
Yep.
And that's it. That's what I've got for everybody. Thank you for your time today. Again, my name's John Paul Keisel. And on this slide here, that's my personal cell phone. That's my email. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact me directly, and I'd be happy to talk with you and put you in contact with a local dealer if you were looking to get estimates for your home.
Cool. Yeah, you could maybe throw your email in the chat or whatever, so people can copy it out of there if you want. But,
Sure.
So Beth, yay, you're back. It's always that.
Hi,
Right.
sorry
Technical-
about the internet.
Yeah, no problem. We did our best.
Did that work?
Seeing, yeah, there you go.
All right,
Yep.
great. So thank you so much, John Paul. That was wonderful. And actually, it was really nice to have you start off because you did a great overview of geothermal, the technology and how it works. Whereas I'm just a layman. I don't know the technology, but I'm a homeowner. I live in Ridgefield. My husband and I moved here in 2012, and we bought this house. And what we figured out was that it was quite expensive to heat and cool our home, and the bills kept coming, especially in those long cold winter months. You know, we'd have we have propane, so we'd have the gas delivery come during the winter, and our bills were really, really astronomical. And I just started thinking, this is really not sustainable for the long term. And obviously with the electricity, with the AC in the summertime as well, it just felt like very wasteful, and it's very expensive. And so I started to do, some more research, and this is about what motivated me to consider geothermal. One of the first things that motivated me was I went to this talk by Rachel Maddow, and it's about her new book, Blowout. And she discussed how the oil and gas industry is raging like a ravenous predator on the field of democracy. It is the richest, most powerful, and most destructive industry on the globe. And it started to make me think about the role that I play as a homeowner in this whole thing, and the perversion of US foreign policy, American values, what we stand for. By being part of these totalitarian regimes, we're sort of propping them up because of our thirst for oil and gas. And the other main factor was, of course, climate change, which really was a big impact on me as well. Obviously, seeing everything you're seeing, the science behind everything, the warming temperatures. Obviously, we have the fires, we have the flooding. All those things have started to factor in. I have young children. I'm thinking about their future. And also the potential health risks of having a family. Carbon monoxide poisoning is always a concern when you're dealing with gas. And, what if you have oil, you have a leak in your house, you don't know about it, being exposed to those kinds of things. As I mentioned before, economic concerns, the cost of heating your home with oil and gas. You never know if the fuel prices are going to be fluctuating. Obviously, it's a lot of money to. I started to think about what could we do, and I started researching, and I found geothermal actually at just a Google search, and then I started to understand more of the benefits of geothermal and did some research, and I was pretty amazed by just how green geothermal is. It's the greenest technology you can have. It's a smaller carbon footprint and eliminates fossil fuel usage, energy conservation. If you have, all electric, it pairs nicely with solar panel systems and electric battery. My husband and I, we have a solar panel system on our house. We're getting the Tesla batteries. So geothermal pairs nicely with that as well. And if you just look at these images here, you know, putting a geo exchange system in a typical home is equal in greenhouse gas reduction to planting an acre of trees. Putting a geo exchange system in a typical home is equal to taking 2 cars off the road. That's what you're doing by putting in a geothermal system. And obviously the crude oil saved per year as well. So those things were just staggering to me and made me really think about, you know, what our carbon footprint is and our need to eliminate our dependence on fossil fuel. It's also a major investment, which was something that we were thinking about. We have young children. We're not planning to go anywhere. It is a high cost upfront, but it really does pay off over time. There are financing plans, and in some cases it can be less per month than the cost of your gas or oil. There are state and federal tax incentives. There's lower operating costs. It does increase your home's value. If you think about it, you have free limitless heating and cooling forever. Anybody who buys your home is going to have that forever. I think that's pretty nice for a buyer. But the other thing is that's fun is there's no equipment outside the house. I was just telling Gavin before we had the call, the most freeing feeling was getting rid of the AC units outside our home. You know, they look ugly, they are really loud, and obviously, you know, if you have all your equipment inside the house, because geothermal, everything's inside, it's all in our basement, there's less wear and tear on the system. So they have a longer shelf life. And the pipes have a 50-year life expectancy as well. And I just wanted to mention that there is a federal tax incentive for 26% that will be available for the remainder of 2022. Gavin, let me know how I'm doing on time, but I'm going to quickly just go through the geothermal install process. So the first thing, you know, you do is you have your Energize Connecticut sort of home audit, home energy audit, and they come and they look at your home and they see how to, you know, increase energy conservation in your home. We got LED, you know, bulbs and replaced everything, and they looked at our home to see if we could have a geothermal system, and they have a selection and analysis situation. We looked for different companies. I actually first found out about my company through looking at the drilling for geothermal. So Connecticut Wells did our job. We had Ralph Mann & Sons do the you know, geothermal install with the equipment, and we used water furnace ourselves. And so these are the steps for the install that I just wanted to mention. I didn't mention first is the home energy audit. Then you want to do the system selection and analysis by researching on companies. Then the next step is the loop installation and the drilling, which is kind of the most painful part of the process, but they don't take up that much space. And I was kind of surprised that we could put trees above it, that it really wasn't encroaching too much. And I mean, it was pretty quick. It just took like a couple of days, and then they just put dirt over it and you just lay grass seed down, and that was it. So it was pretty painless for us. Then the step 3 would be connecting the geothermal loops to the home module. And then of course the install of the geothermal equipment. That took the longest because they're, you know, making it specific to your home. And I do want to mention what John Paul said, which is that they are very careful about the load and making sure it is a perfect fit for your home. Like Ralph Mann & Sons came back several times to make sure that it was perfect system for our home. It's very customized. And I have nothing but great things to say about all of these companies. I had a wonderful experience. So feel free to email me. I can give you my information in the chat, but these are the groups that I use. There are some pictures of the loops going in. You know, they bring these big machines in and they do the drilling and they put in the pipes. And this is the system we have for water furnace. There are some other companies as well that do geothermal. Bell was another one that we got an estimate from. They're in Mayapack, New York, and we kind of wanted a Connecticut-based one for us, but they also do a lot of work. Dandelion is a Google startup. They were not doing geothermal in Connecticut at the time I reached out to them. They were only doing New York. And I've tried to reach out to them many times. They're not very good at responding. So I didn't have the best customer service experience, but they are also doing work on this as well. And this is just to show you, get in touch with Energize Connecticut. If you're interested in geothermal, that's kind of the first place I went to see about this. And that was going to be going off to John Paul. So I did that pretty quick, but if anybody has any questions, let me know.
So there was, I haven't seen any new ones yet since you started, Beth, but there was a question that I forgot to follow up on before. So the, the relative cost between, air source heat pumps versus ground source heat pumps, and then relative efficiency between air source and ground source. Can you, John Paul, I don't know if you want to speak to that?
So the cost of a job, I mean, it's hard to say because every job is different. But geothermal is going to be the most expensive. When you're comparing replacing an existing system to an air source heat pump or to a geothermal, and really the cost difference lies in that loop field. But again, that loop field is, it's an investment, right? You're building a power plant that is going to power your home going forward. So but you're probably in Connecticut, I would say you're probably going to be looking maybe in the 35,000 upwards for a geothermal system. And, bigger homes are going to require a bigger loop field. They're going to require more equipment. So the cost for a larger home is going to be more than it would for, a typical smaller home. If you've got a 1,500 square foot ranch, it's going to cost less than it would if you've got an 8,000 square foot Victorian, right? So in terms of costs, that's what you're looking at. But geothermal by far is the most efficient. It's going to be more efficient than any air source heat pump that's out there.
Right. I think, kind of what you're saying, if I could paraphrase it, is that upfront is the bigger investment, but it's going to last a really long time.
It pays you back.
Yeah, exactly. It pays back, and it pays back for a very, very, very long time. And then if you think about that, obviously the internal equipment will wear out because it's got moving parts and that kind of thing. But the ultra high molecular weight polyethylene tubing that's out there, that's going to
last forever, essentially. Right? It's going to outlast. It's going to outlast everyone that's on this panel right now. And also, it's so in terms of the efficiencies, it's going to be the most efficient. It's the greenest option that's available. And Beth, as Beth said, she did her research. I'm just some sales guy that none of you people know. So trust your neighbor, trust Beth, right? She lives in town with you. She's a real person, and she found us. I didn't.
And I'll also say that, just to mention, I mean, the comfort level of having this. I mean, can you speak to that? Like, why is it so much more comfortable, John Paul, to have geothermal? Like, it feels so much better than the propane.
Well, it's so much more comfortable. There's a few reasons. So a geothermal system is going to be sized correctly. A system that's sized correctly is going to run longer, use less energy, move larger quantities of air. All right, if you've got an oversized oil system or an oversized propane system or something like that, it runs, it puts out a lot of hot air, it stops.
Right.
Air gets cold. It'll run, and then it just does that over and over.
Cycling.
So you've got big peaks and valleys in terms of temperatures that's going on in your house. Whereas a system that's sized correctly, a geothermal system that's sized correctly, you're going to have you're not going to have these big swings. You're going to have much more flat line in terms of temperatures in the house.
Yep.
Also, moving more volumes of air in the summertime allows us to wring more humidity out of the air, right?
Mhm.
We've got a larger coil that's cold. We're pushing warm air across that. The moisture in the air is going to condense on that coil, drain away, and then we've got nice dry air coming out the other side. In the summer, in the wintertime, or in the wintertime rather, when paired with a humidifier, we're going to be putting humidity back into the house. So
Yeah, so there's a question relative, so somebody says they've got their house on a ledge. And,
mhm.
so, throwing around the numbers that you've been, or the costs you've been talking about, is it like a lot more expensive to drill down through a bunch of rock than laying stuff out on a, lawn, or is it like,
Usually for a retrofit, a vertical bore is going to cost less.
okay,
Now, because part of what you need to figure into a cost, as opposed to like digging a big pit and burying the pipe in the yard, when we've got that, like now we have to rebuild all your landscaping too.
Right,
So
right.
that's a cost that, a well contractor, that's not in there for them. Most well contractors will say, okay, we'll backfill it, we'll put down some topsoil, we'll put down some grass seed, and then that's it. Any other landscaping is on you.
so I got one,
So a vertical bore is going to be less disruptive. So, that's something to figure into the costs.
yeah. So I guess I have one other thought too, because we're running up on time. But just like if you had, the larger the house is that you've got to do, if you've got to drill 2 holes, have a guy come and do 2 holes, however deep they are, that's it's probably going to be 2 holes for a little house or 2 holes for a big house. The truck's going to come do that stuff. So there's probably some economies of scale. If you've got a big house, the cost for is going to look less than if you've got a little tiny house and you're doing all that stuff for it.
It all depends on how deep you can go. But the bigger the house, the bigger the loop, like the bigger the loops need to be.
Yeah. Okay.
So, that's in terms of specifics, you'd need to really, something that's really better between you and a contractor.
Yeah. Comes down to those details again.
It's all, the devil's in the details, right?
Every time. Well, this has been really good. You guys have been great. Is there anything, any last things you guys want to say?
I just think that making this decision has just made me feel so much better about what I'm doing, personally with the environment. It also, it's been nice to not see the gas truck show up as much. Casey Energy used to be coming down my driveway every month, and I'd get a bill, a really large bill, and it just got really crazy. And they tried to come this winter because we still have it as a backup, and they came down the driveway and they said, we're going to do a fill up, and they didn't need anything, and they said, do you have an alternative? Oh, that's it. And that was the best feeling. It is so much more comfortable. And if you and it's so custom, to your home, so that's why it's so different depending on the home. But I think it's just been a really good decision for me. And as you can see, it's the greenest way you can go for heating and cooling your home.
Yeah, cool. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up and or turn over to Lori in a second. But I'm just going to make a shameless plug that I'm doing a talk next week on air source heat pumps. So if you want to hear more about those, that's me next week, same time, same channel. Okay, Lori.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank Beth and John Paul for their excellent presentations today, and also for the interesting questions we had from the audience. I'd also like to once again thank Race, our partner, for organizing this series, and we hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. We wish you a good rest of your evening, and we'll say good night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.